Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're decoding the dense, kind of intimidating language of medical textbooks into a practical user's manual for literally the most complex machine on Earth, your own body. If you've ever wanted to truly understand the mechanics powering your every move, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get into it.
Here is our game plan. We'll start by speaking the body's language, then look at tissues and skeletal muscles, zoom into the microscopic motors, test out the mechanics of movement, and finally, check out the unstoppable engine powering the whole shebang.
Now, if you've ever heard medical jargon and felt completely lost, hey, you're not alone. That phrase on the left, to most of us, it's practically another language. But here's the thing. These complex terms are actually just highly precise coordinates used by kinesiologists and surgeons. When they talk to us, they translate it into what you see on the right, a serious high ankle sprain. In this explainer, we're going to learn how to actually read those exact scientific coordinates.
Section 1. Speaking the body's language and establishing baseline coordinates. Whenever we map the body, we always start in the standard anatomical position. That means standing upright, feet shoulder-width apart, toes pointed forward, arms down, and palms facing forward. This specific stance is our absolute foundation, ensuring any talk of movement or injury is universally understood.
But you might be wondering, why does a surgeon need to use these specific, almost archaic directional terms? Why not just say front or back when operating? It kind of seems like a lot of unnecessary vocabulary, right?
Well, the answer is absolute precision. Picture a medical team in the middle of a critical operation. Knowing that anterior strictly means the front of the body and posterior strictly means the back guarantees zero confusion, like your toes are anterior to your heel. There's literally no room for misinterpretation, which is exactly what you want when someone is operating on you.
We also use proximal for body parts closer to the trunk or the point of attachment, and distal for parts farther away. Think of your arm, right? Your shoulder is proximal, but your fingers are distal. By using these exact terms, professionals create a flawless, universal grid of the human structure.
And it gets really interesting where we map human movement using two-dimensional planes. If you're doing a forward lunge, you're moving through the sagittal plane, which divides the body vertically, left and right. Step out for a lateral lunge, you're in the frontal plane. Twisting in your seat to grab your seatbelt, that's the transverse plane. And actually, most athletic movements combine two or even all three of these planes at once.
All right, Section 2, Tissues and Skeletal Muscles, the body's hardware. The human body has four broad tissue types: epithelial, connective, nervous, and muscle. But today, we're locking in on our dynamic skeletal muscles.
We tend to think of muscles just as the things that make us move, but they do so much more than that. They're constantly making these tiny micro-adjustments to maintain our upright posture against gravity. They act as stabilizers to prevent joint dislocation. They even control internal tracts so we can swallow. And amazingly, they generate heat to keep our internal body temperature balanced. When you get freezing cold, your body triggers random skeletal muscle contractions, shivering, specifically to break down cellular energy and keep you alive. Pretty wild.
These muscles actually build this fascinating nesting doll structure. A skeletal muscle is incredibly organized, featuring three interlocking connective tissue layers. The outermost layer is the epimysium. Inside that, the paramysium groups muscle fibers into bundles called fascicles. And then, the endomysium envelopes each individual muscle fiber. All three of these layers intertwine their collagen fibers with your tendons, which then blend right into your bones. So when a muscle contracts, it pulls the tendon pulls the bone, and boom, you've got movement.
Section 3. The microscopic motors inside the muscle fiber. Let's zoom in even deeper, way past those nested layers of tissue, to look at what's actually driving every physical action you take.
Skeletal muscle cells, or muscle fibers, are surprisingly massive for human cells. I mean, in your upper leg, a single muscle fiber can reach up to 30 centimeters long. Because they're so huge, hundreds of smaller cells actually fuse together during embryonic development. This means a single muscle fiber has multiple nuclei. And that's absolutely crucial because it needs all those gene copies to pump out the massive amounts of proteins required for contraction.
Inside these giant fibers are thousands of microscopic units called sarcomeres. Think of the sarcomere as the primary functional unit of the muscle. Inside it, you've got thick protein strands called myosin and thin ones called actin. When your nervous system sends a signal, these thick and thin filaments slide past each other, pulling the ends of the sarcomere, the Z-discs, closer together. When millions of these little units fire all at once, your entire muscle contracts.
Moving right along to Section 4, the mechanics of movement and testing the joints.
Now that we understand the hardware and the microscopic motors, it's time to explore synovial joints, those incredible structures that give us our flexibility.
Here is a quick breakdown of our highly mobile synovial joints. Basically, the shape of the bones dictates the movement. You have simple uniaxial hinge joints, like your elbow or knee, opening and closing in just one direction. Then you've got pivot joints, like the top of your neck, which lets you shake your head no. And it goes all the way up to multi-axial ball and socket joints, like your shoulder and hip, giving you the absolute maximum range of movement in multiple directions.
Actually, I want you to physically test these mechanics with me right now. Wherever you are, perform elevation and depression of your scapula by shrugging your shoulders right up to your ears and then pulling them back down. That upward motion, that's elevation. And the downward motion is depression.
Okay, let's try a few more. Hold your hands out and pretend you're holding a bowl of soup. That palms-up position is supination of your forearm. Now flip your palms to face backward. That's pronation, where your radius and ulna bones literally cross over each other to form an X. Now look down at your feet. Point your toes up toward the ceiling to test dorsiflexion, and point them down toward the ground for ankle plantar flexion. These are the exact, precise terms pros use to describe your everyday movements.
Which brings us to Section 5, the unstoppable engine, also known as the cardiovascular loop. Look, your skeletal muscles absolutely get tired, but there is one muscle in this ultimate machine that literally cannot afford to fatigue, and that's the heart.
This number right here brilliantly illustrates the power of cardiac muscle tissue. Unlike skeletal muscle, cardiac tissue is built to never take a break. Over an average lifetime, a human heart will beat an astonishing 3 billion times. 3 billion contractions, circulating oxygen, clearing out waste, and delivering nutrients, without ever stopping to rest. It's mind-blowing.
It functions as this brilliant dual-chambered pump. The smaller right side of your heart takes in deoxygenated blood and pushes it on a short little trip to your lungs. We call that the pulmonary system. Meanwhile, the heavily muscled left side receives that freshly oxygenated blood and forcefully blasts it out to your entire body. That larger loop is the systemic system. Because it has to push blood so far, the left side of your heart is physically larger and much stronger.
When a doctor uses a blood pressure cuff, they're actually temporarily collapsing an artery to measure the exact internal pressure of that systemic system. A healthy adult averages a reading of 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury. But what do those two numbers actually mean for our mechanical engine?
Well, that top number, the systolic reading, measures the pressure when the heart is fully contracted, forcefully pushing the blood out into the arteries. The bottom number, the diastolic reading, is just as crucial. It measures the resting pressure in your arteries during that tiny split-second window when the heart relaxes between those 3 billion beats. Ultimately, everything we've looked at today is completely interconnected. From the standard anatomical coordinates, down to the microscopic sarcomeres pulling on your bones, to testing the limits of your synovial joints, and it's all fueled by the massive systemic blood loop of the heart. This entire structural symphony works in perfect unison to make every single movement you do possible.
So now that you understand the precise language and the incredible internal mechanics of your body's complex user manual, I'll leave you with this. How are you going to apply this knowledge to optimize your own physical movement today? Think about the planes of motion you use, the posture your skeletal muscles maintain, and that unstoppable engine beating in your chest right now. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep moving.